The discussion opens with a direct challenge to the dominant narrative circulating through brokerage desks and client communications. Viewers are told that what is being presented as an unavoidable silver market meltdown is not a neutral assessment of risk, but a constructed story designed to provoke fear and premature selling. According to the argument laid out, brokers are actively encouraging clients to short silver or liquidate existing positions by insisting that a large crash is mathematically guaranteed and imminent. This message is framed as urgent and unavoidable, leaving little room for alternative interpretations. The claim is that this pressure campaign is not emerging organically from market conditions, but is being deliberately amplified. The language used by brokers, as described, emphasizes inevitability, scale, and timing, creating the impression that anyone still holding silver is exposed to catastrophic losses. The effect of this messaging is psychological rather than analytical, encouraging reactive decisions rather than measured evaluation. At the center of this framing is the assertion that the crash narrative itself is the real distortion. Instead of reflecting genuine weakness in silver, it is presented as a hoax designed to manufacture sellers at a moment when natural selling interest is limited. The speaker argues that this is not a coincidence, but a strategic effort occurring at a very specific point in the market cycle. By positioning the supposed meltdown as both unavoidable and externally driven, brokers are described as guiding clients toward actions that conveniently align with the needs of larger institutional players. The core accusation is that the public-facing explanation is inverted. What is being marketed as risk management for clients is, in reality, risk management for entities on the other side of the trade. This sets the foundation for the broader investigation into who benefits from this fear-driven narrative and why it is being deployed now. The way this narrative is delivered to clients is described as calculated and repetitive. Brokers are said to frame the situation in absolute terms, presenting the coming move in silver not as a probability, but as a certainty. Clients are reportedly told that the market is facing an unavoidable structural event that will overwhelm any other forces, making resistance futile. In these conversations, nuance is removed, and the outcome is portrayed as pre-decided. The message hinges on scale and authority. By emphasizing large dollar figures and institutional mechanisms, brokers reinforce the idea that individual investors are powerless in the face of what is coming. The implication is that only those who act immediately by selling or shorting can escape damage. Any hesitation is framed as denial or ignorance of how the system works. According to the account, this framing also discourages independent verification. Clients are not encouraged to ask whether the event is already priced in or whether other market participants are prepared for it. Instead, the focus remains on the danger of being late. The fear is not just of losses, but of being the last one holding when everyone else has already exited. This presentation creates a one-directional flow of decision-making. Selling becomes the default response, not because conditions have materially changed overnight, but because the narrative insists there is no alternative. The broker's confidence, combined with the apparent technical complexity of the explanation, makes the recommendation difficult to challenge. The result, as described, is a psychological squeeze rather than a market one. Clients are guided toward capitulation by the insistence that the crash is both imminent and mechanical. This prepares the ground for the next claim, that the urgency itself serves interests far beyond retail risk management. The argument then shifts to who is believed to benefit from this wave of urgency. The claim presented is that the true drivers behind the crash narrative are not acting in the interests of clients, but in the interests of large bullion banks that are under pressure themselves. These institutions are described as carrying significant short exposure in silver, positions that become increasingly difficult to manage as prices rise and physical demand remains firm. According to the explanation, these short positions are not easily unwound in a rising or stable market. They require willing sellers on the other side. When natural selling dries up, the system depends on fear to create liquidity. This is where the broker-driven narrative becomes critical. By persuading clients to sell or short, additional supply is manufactured at precisely the moment it is most needed. The presentation frames this as a defensive maneuver rather than an offensive one. The banks are not portrayed as confident actors pressing an advantage, but as entities attempting to relieve pressure from positions that have become toxic. The urgency, the certainty, and the insistence that selling is the only rational option are all interpreted as symptoms of stress rather than strength. Within this framework, brokers are positioned as intermediaries transmitting this pressure downstream. Whether intentionally or passively, they become the distribution channel for a narrative designed to solve an institutional problem. The fear communicated to clients is described as a reflection of the fear existing higher up the chain. This reframing alters the meaning of the crash warnings entirely. Instead of signaling impending market failure, they are presented as evidence of imbalance within the system. The push to create sellers is not driven by deteriorating fundamentals. but by the need to manage exposure before conditions tighten further. This sets the stage for examining the specific mechanism being used to justify the urgency, the annual index rebalance. Attention then turns to the mechanism being cited to legitimize the sense of emergency. The Bloomberg Commodity Index is introduced as the central justification brokers are using to anchor their warnings in something that appears objective and unavoidable. The index is described as large, rules-based, and mechanical, qualities that make it effective as a psychological tool. By invoking an automated process rather than discretionary decision-making, the narrative removes human judgment from the equation. The index undergoes a scheduled rebalance every January, adjusting commodity weightings according to predefined rules. Brokers are said to present this process as a kind of market law, implying that whatever selling results from it must occur regardless of price, sentiment, or external demand. The rebalance is framed as a force that cannot be negotiated with or delayed, reinforcing the idea that the outcome is already locked in. This portrayal is critical to how the fear narrative works. By pointing to a well-known benchmark with significant assets tracking it, brokers can argue that the selling pressure is not speculative, but structural. The rebalance becomes a countdown clock, transforming a routine administrative adjustment into an impending crisis event. According to the explanation, the index manages roughly $100 billion in assets, a figure that is repeatedly emphasized to amplify the perceived impact. The sheer size of the number is used to suggest that the resulting flows will overwhelm the silver market regardless of context. The complexity of index mechanics further discourages scrutiny, allowing the simplified conclusion to dominate client discussions. In this framing, the BCI rebalance is not presented as one factor among many, but as the defining driver of near-term price action. Its role is elevated from background process to primary threat. This sets up the next phase of the argument, which focuses on how the specific 2026 rebalance figures for silver are being interpreted and distorted to support the crash narrative. The discussion then narrows to the specific numbers being circulated in connection with the upcoming rebalance. For 2026, silver's target weighting within the index is described as having been reduced, a change that brokers highlight as proof that a large liquidation is unavoidable. This adjustment is presented as evidence that silver is being systematically cut from institutional portfolios, reinforcing the impression of structural weakness. Central to this messaging is the headline figure of a $6 billion sell order. Brokers are said to repeat this number as a definitive outcome, using it to shock and intimidate. The size of the figure is emphasized without context, allowing it to stand alone as a symbol of impending damage. The implication is that such a volume cannot be absorbed without severe price consequences. The explanation acknowledges that the sell order is real in numerical terms. Based on the index's rules and current exposure, the rebalance requires roughly 5% of the silver position to be sold, which translates into a figure in the range being cited. This is not dismissed as fictional or exaggerated in arithmetic, but the interpretation attached to it is challenged. What is being criticized is how this number is framed. The narrative omits why the position grew so large in the first place, and instead treats the reduction as a vote of no confidence. By isolating the sell figure from its cause, brokers are able to present it as a bearish signal rather than an administrative adjustment. This selective framing allows the 6B number to function as a scare headline rather than a neutral data point. It becomes the centerpiece of the meltdown story, even though it represents a fraction of an existing position rather than a wholesale exit. The focus on magnitude without explanation sets the stage for the next clarification, why the index is selling silver at all. The argument then addresses the missing context behind the rebalance itself. The selling is not described as a response to weakness or declining confidence in silver, but as the mechanical consequence of strong performance. Over the prior year, silver's price gains caused its effective weighting inside the index to expand far beyond its original target. What is being corrected is not failure, but excess exposure created by outperformance. As silver rose through 2025, its share of the index portfolio grew automatically. Without intervention, that weighting would have continued to drift higher, violating the index's predefined limits. The rebalance exists specifically to prevent this kind of concentration. From this perspective, the sell order is not a judgment on silver's prospects, but a reset back toward a predetermined allocation. This distinction is central to the debunking of the crash narrative. The index is not reducing silver because it performed poorly, but because it performed too well. The same rules would apply to any component that exceeded its target weight, regardless of underlying fundamentals or demand conditions. By omitting this explanation, the broker narrative reverses the meaning of the event. What is, in essence, a byproduct of strength is repackaged as evidence of weakness. The mechanical nature of the process is used selectively, emphasized to suggest inevitability, but ignored when explaining causality. The result is a misleading conclusion. Clients are encouraged to believe that the index is abandoning silver, when in reality it is trimming an oversized position created by prior gains. This reframing undercuts the idea that the rebalance represents a bearish signal, and it leads directly into the next claim, that the market has long been aware of this adjustment and has already acted on it. The next point challenges the notion that the rebalance represents new or sudden information. According to the explanation, the scale and timing of the adjustment have been visible well in advance. The rules governing the index are public, the performance of silver was observable throughout the year, and the resulting overweight condition did not emerge overnight. For informed participants, the outcome was predictable months ahead of the January rebalance window. Because of this transparency, the argument holds that sophisticated market actors did not wait for the official rebalance date to react. Active managers and other informed participants are described as having already positioned themselves in anticipation, selling portions of their exposure during November and December. This early activity allowed them to reduce risk gradually, without needing to compete during the mechanical execution of the rebalance itself. Within this framing, much of the selling pressure attributed to the rebalance has already occurred. The dramatic figure being cited now reflects the gross adjustment required on paper, not the net impact still waiting to hit the market. By the time brokers are sounding alarms to clients, the bulk of the adjustment is described as already absorbed. This reframes the current moment entirely. Rather than standing at the edge of a massive cliff, the market is portrayed as being near the end of a process that has been unfolding quietly for weeks. The fear being promoted now arrives after the most informed participants have already acted. The implication is that the remaining selling associated with the rebalance is relatively limited, especially compared to the headline numbers being circulated. What remains is not a wave of surprise liquidation, but the final administrative completion of a trade that has largely been anticipated. This sets up the following claim: that the renewed urgency from brokers is not about managing risk from future selling, but about creating liquidity from those who did not act earlier. With the bulk of the adjustment already behind the market, the focus shifts to what remains and why the pressure campaign intensifies at this stage. The argument presented is that brokers are now targeting retail holders precisely because they represent the last significant source of available liquidity. After institutional and active managers adjusted their exposure earlier, fewer natural sellers remain. In this context, the renewed warnings are framed as opportunistic rather than protective. Clients are being urged to sell into what is described as a dangerous moment, even though the primary selling linked to the rebalance has largely passed. The timing is critical. Instead of advising caution ahead of the anticipated adjustment, the strongest messaging appears after prices have already been pressured and sentiment has weakened. According to the explanation, this creates a familiar pattern. Retail investors, reacting later and with less information, are pushed to sell into declines. Their selling then provides the liquidity that more sophisticated players require to re-enter positions they previously reduced. What is framed as panic avoidance for clients becomes, in effect, an exit ramp for others. The broker's role in this phase is portrayed as especially consequential. By reinforcing the idea that the worst is still ahead, they discourage holding through temporary weakness. The possibility that selling pressure is nearly exhausted is not presented. Instead, the narrative insists that capitulation now is rational and necessary. This dynamic transforms the rebalance from a neutral mechanical process into a transfer mechanism. Assets move from those acting under fear to those prepared to step back in once the forced selling narrative concludes. The result is a market where the final sellers are not responding to new information, but to amplified anxiety at the tail end of an already anticipated event. The discussion then introduces what is described as a stabilizing counterforce to the entire narrative. This is referred to as the China shield, a factor that is said to fundamentally alter how any temporary selling pressure plays out. Rather than encountering an empty market on the other side, dips in silver are described as meeting immediate demand from China. The basis for this claim is the existence of a significant premium in Shanghai compared to New York. Silver prices in China are described as being meaningfully higher, creating an incentive for physical metal to flow eastward. This pricing gap reframes weakness in Western paper markets as an opportunity elsewhere, rather than a signal of global oversupply. Within this framework, any decline caused by mechanical selling is not seen as destructive, but as attractive inventory. China is described as treating these price dips as clearance events, stepping in to absorb supply as soon as it becomes available. This demand is presented as persistent rather than speculative, driven by structural buying rather than short-term trading. The implication is that the rebalance does not occur in isolation. Even if selling appears heavy on paper, it is met by physical demand that limits follow-through. This undermines the idea of a cascading collapse. Instead of accelerating downward, prices encounter a floor created by external buying pressure. By introducing this factor, the argument shifts from purely internal market mechanics to a broader global interaction. The rebalance may dictate selling on one side, but it does not control who buys on the other. This balance, it is argued, explains why the feared meltdown fails to materialize, despite the headline numbers attached to the rebalance. The final stage of the argument focuses on timing and resolution. The rebalance window is described as finite, with a clearly defined period during which the mechanical adjustments take place. As this window closes, the justification for continued fear weakens. The selling associated with the index does not persist indefinitely, and once the process is complete, the narrative built around it loses relevance. Within this framework, any remaining weakness is portrayed as temporary rather than structural. The earlier emphasis on inevitability dissolves once the calendar-driven event passes. What remains is a market that has already absorbed anticipated selling and continues to face external demand from buyers willing to step in during periods of pressure. The conclusion drawn is that the aggressive warnings issued late in the process are misplaced. Rather than signaling the beginning of a collapse, they coincide with the exhaustion of the very mechanism being used to justify them. The fear narrative peaks as the underlying driver fades. The argument closes by asserting that the expected outcome is not prolonged deterioration, but a sharp adjustment in the opposite direction once the rebalance is fully behind the market. With forced selling complete and opportunistic demand already present, the conditions described point toward a rapid reassertion of price rather than continued decline. In this final framing, the so-called meltdown is revealed as a misinterpretation of timing and motive. What was marketed as an unavoidable crash is redefined as a short-lived administrative event, amplified through fear at precisely the moment its influence is ending.